Hey, you guys. So I wanted to come on here and discuss the case of Nathaniel Woods, the black man who faced execution on March 5th, 2020, for the murders of three police officers during the year of 2004 in Birmingham, Alabama. And I want to touch base and shed some light on the case itself, as well as give some insight into the well known racist system that exists right here within Alabama. And I speak from experience because I live right here, so I know firsthand just how racist it can get down here. And I'm also going to cover an article about the racist governor that resides over this state and why I'm not surprised by her passiveness to intervene in this situation. Now, I want to give you a forewarning. The video is going to be a little bit long because throughout I will be cross referencing different cases and providing some backstory to each case so you guys can understand how history repeats itself. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this one. Okay, so the article says here Alabama inmate Nathaniel Woods executed for 2004 police murders. Woods, co defendant, who has confessed to being the triggerman and denies Woods was complicit, implored for his execution to be stopped. So the article was by Eric Ortiz. It says here Alabama inmate Nathaniel Woods was put to death Thursday night, 3 hours after his scheduled execution was initially delayed when the Supreme Court stepped in for a last minute review of his case. But the High Court ultimately declined to intervene, and Alabama Governor Ivey, you guys make sure to remember that name, also said she would not impede the execution, sealing Woods' fate. Woods, 43, who was convicted for his role in the fatal shootings of three Birmingham police officers in 2004, was pronounced dead at 9:01 p.m. by lethal injection. The Alabama Department of Corrections said he had no last words but appeared to arrange his hands in sign of his Islamic faith, according to the Associated. Now, this part right here, of course, no one should be surprised by. It's sad, but this is how it's always been. We are dealing with some very savage and barbaric people in this world, and they don't care about black people. If they can exert their full power against us, but not by not doing anything, while their cohorts do harm to us, then they are fully complicit by taking the stance of neutrality. And I'm also very familiar with who Governor Ivey is. And once I'm done with this video, you'll know why she is a very hypocritical, and in no way, shape, or form is she an ally to us. And side note, but this is why I say to you guys over and over to be very careful about who it is that you vote for and to do your due diligence in researching these politicians before going out to cast your vote for them. But I do digress because if you guys have been watching my channel, then you know my position when it comes to voting. If not, then just refer to my previous videos and I'll make sure to link those in the description for you. I find this to be a really sad case, and it reminds me of George Steiny's case. If you guys are not familiar with George Steiny, he is the young black boy who, in the 1940s, was the youngest person in history to be executed for a crime that they later found out that he didn't do. And let me please briefly describe George's case so that you understand why these events are not so uncommon. But nonetheless, still very sad, and it's such a loss to our community. Now, George Steiny Jr., age 14 at the time, year 1944, police frantically search for the young boy. His parents are not at home, his little sister hiding in a chicken coop behind the house. The case: two young white girls had their lives taken away due to excessive blunt trauma force and were discovered in a ditch. According to other people's testimonies, Steiny Jr. and his sister were said to be the last ones who were with these two white girls. He was in an interrogation room with detectives with no parental supervision, being asked a multitude of questions. And if this sounds familiar, then you're right, because remember the Central Park Five? Now, through these series of questions, they were able to coerce George Steiny Jr. into confessing to a crime he did not commit. It took a jury 10 minutes to decide on whether or not he should be put to death, and on April 24th, he was sentenced to execution by means of electric chair. And unfortunately, during the 1940s, 14 was the legal age by which a person can assume the harsh penalties of criminality. And get this, even his own lawyer decided not to appeal the decision. This poor boy did not have a chance. Now, I wanted to give you guys that case to help you understand how young black boys are viewed and perceived by society, basically from the time they can start forming words, and how this contributes to our image and how it's collectively weaponized against us in terms of media representations. And think a while ago, I recalled seeing a comment somewhere on social media, and I think it might have been on Facebook, where someone had posted a comment and they were talking about it in regards to the article by Nathaniel Woods, and it read something saying something like, how many of us will it take to, I think it said, how many of us will it take to understand that our lives matter? And really, whenever I read that comment, I just kind of shook my head at it in disappointment, because that's not the first time that I've seen a comment like that. I've actually seen this question before, and it was asked in a similar manner. And my question to a person who would ask a question like that is, how long is it going to take you to understand that our lives don't matter to them? And I understand that Black people are very emotional, but sometimes in the midst of our emotions, we don't stop to understand how certain situations and interactions can sound so ignorant. Now, I'm sorry that I had to say that, but seriously, this isn't something new. I'm going to need for us to understand something, that we are definitely at war with the world. And while it may sound crazy and quixotic, but don't take my word for it, just stop for a second and look around. How many of us are given unfair and unjust prison sentences with public defenders who have a known reputation for not having adequate resources? Most Black people are unable to afford a lawyer when placed in these predicaments, so they have no choice but to take a public defender. And the thing about it is, unfortunately, since they don't have access to resources that the prosecutors do, they ultimately end up losing the case as a result of poor representation. Now, this is something that really infuriates me, but again, I'm not shocked by it. But imagine that you have a person coming forward, admitting and confessing to the crime, uh, and that still isn't enough. So that should kind of go. That should go to show you that the sooner that Black people wake up and realize that we're in a race war, the less shocked we'll be at these events. And the thing about it is that the dominant society doesn't care. It seems like that once you're in their crosshairs, they are relentless and they don't release their grip on you until they acquire what they want. I mean, we can even look at a modern case like, let's take, for example, Jesse Smollett. Now, you guys can actually look that one up yourselves. You probably are still aware of it, so I won't go too much into detail with that one. But let's probably go with someone else, like probably Asada Shakur. So Asada Shakur, she allegedly had murdered a police officer in the 1970s and went to Cuba, which I still praise her actions for when she did that. The FBI and the US government in general still haven't gotten over that one, and they still pester Cuba over wanting her to be handed over, which is why I'm so elated that Fidel Castro kept saying basically, no, you can't have her back. And even after his subsequent passing, Cuba still is protecting her. So I'm happy that she can live her life in solitude without the worries and concerns of being betrayed. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and continue reading this article. So it says here, in the days leading up to the execution, Wood's family and prominent activists rallied on his behalf, collecting signatures in hopes of swaying Ivey to grant him clemency. Renewed questions surrounding his trial, accusations that his case was mishandled, and scrutiny over how Alabama's criminal laws treat Black defendants raised concerns. Even Wood's co-defendant, Kerry Spencer, who has confessed to being the triggerman and denies Woods was complicit, was implored for his execution to be stopped. Nathaniel Woods is 100% innocent, Spencer, who remains on death row, wrote in an open letter. I know that to be a fact because I'm the person that, in all three of the officers that Nathaniel was subsequently charged and convicted of, Nathaniel Woods doesn't even deserve to be incarcerated, much less. Now, if you guys remember earlier, I said I was going to give you a little insight into our racist governor, Kay Ivey. So let us jump into this segment. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears here for a minute and read this article I found on her in her good old college days. And you guys, question for you, why does it always seem like that these politicians do racially motivated things in college? Like, why is it always their college years? But anyway, the article says, okay, so now you guys see the article. It says, Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey apologizes for blackface skit in college. Governor Kay Ivey of Alabama apologized on Thursday with genuine remorse, she said, for wearing blackface during a skit in 1967 while she was a student at Auburn University, the latest in a string of revelations of public figures who engaged in racist pantomime. The fallout from the revelation was unclear on Thursday afternoon. Miss Ivey, 74, is a Republican and her party holds all statewide offices and controls the state legislature. Some black leaders in Alabama said they were still processing the details first published at AL.com, a statewide news service, but others were calling on her to step down. There's some things you just can't do, said Bernard Similton, president of the Alabama NAACP. If you participated in blackface and things like that, then you should not be governor of any state. I just don't get, like, why apologize? Like, at this point, with everything going on, I'm just trying to understand why, like, it's like, why? You can't really apologize for actions such as this because ultimately, these behaviors are reflective of a person's instinctive nature. And what I mean by this is that if she's done this before, what makes you think that she has any form of contrition now? In fact, if she had any type of genuine remorse, she would have apologized a long time ago. And the reason people apologize for these actions is because it reflects poorly on their political campaign or their career path or what have you. But why have we not figured this out by now is what I'm trying to figure out. And it's sad to say, but sorry, like love, almost just seems like it's just another word that loses its meaning with as many times as we hear it. And even an apology has lack of sympathy, especially in this case because she waited so long. And don't come on here and tell me she didn't know any better or she was a different person at that age. All of these excuses that excuse her behavior. And just to that, I want to say no. Some things are reprehensible and some actions are just inexcusable. And blackface is not acceptable under any circumstance. If we lived in a society where we had disciplinary actions that applied across the board, then there is no way that this woman should have gotten this far in her career. But that's not the world we live in. So it really speaks to the insurmountable corruption that exists and how black people are the ones to bear this corruption through ludicrous consequences and penalties. So one thing I want to say is now I don't want to go too deep into this article because I don't want this video to be too exceedingly long and also because I want to focus primarily on Nathaniel in this video. So what I want to do is I'll go ahead and link the article to the description box if you guys want to finish reading the rest of it, and I highly encourage you to do so. But back to Nathaniel. So one more thing, the dominant society will bring up every iota of a black person's past to paint them in the most negative light. Officers were sent to the home to serve a misdemeanor warrant, but prosecutors said Woods, who was 27 at the time, set up an ambush that allowed Spencer to shoot at them multiple times. 3 officers, Carlos Owen, Harley Chisholm III, and Charles Benet, were killed, while a 4th officer at the scene was shot but survived. Spencer admitted to shooting the officers but said it was in self-defense because the officers were assaulting Woods, an assertion that the judge did not permit at trial. 2 of the officers who were killed were later accused by another drug dealer at Woods' home of being involved in a corrupt scheme that protected dealers in exchange for money. The Birmingham police declined to comment on the allegation. The surviving officer, Michael Collins, said at the time that he believed Woods helped plan the shooting, but that he didn't actually fire a weapon. According to him, Woods yelled, I give up, just don't spray me with that mace," before the shooting initiated. Collins added that, "I knew it wasn't Nathaniel who fired at him." Okay, so regarding the prosecutor's statement, to me, it doesn't seem to make any sense. And I don't really understand what purpose it would have served for Nathaniel to have set up an ambush. That part was a little bit skeptical to me. But if we look at the case of the Central Park 5, if you guys remember, the lead prosecutor, Linda Fairstein, also came up with a convoluted story to indict those young boys at the time and bring them up on non-existent charges, in essence placing them at a scene they were never at. So prosecutors are notorious for this. And the part where the article was talking about Spencer admitting to it and to discuss in such great detail, I'm really having a difficult time understanding why his testimony was not even taken into account, because when I read it, it sounded like a credible testimony, and he obviously isn't mentally impaired to a point where he's not able to testify. So why was his statement not being considered, to me, is disturbing. But what's really interesting to me is how these types of cases all seem to parallel one another to a certain degree. Because if you guys think about it, notice how certain elements seem to be reminiscent of past cases. Evidence is either ignored, it's tossed out altogether. No high political figures seem to intervene, and ultimately, the consequence almost always ends in execution or extended prison sentences. And the thing about it is that the fourth police officer himself said that he didn't even believe Nathaniel shot the weapon. He even stated this himself. So you have a person who was there to witness everything, two people in fact, and none of what they say matters at the end of the day because a black man's life has to come to an end. And that is so infuriating and frustrating because it is always us that just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And they are so merciless in their wrath towards us. But I do want to go ahead and kind of work towards closing this out. So I'm going to go ahead and finish with the remainder of this article and then come back with my final commentary on this. So it says here. Okay, and then it says, but in a statement Thursday evening after the Supreme Court temporarily halted the execution, Ivey said that she would not step in. This is not a decision that I take lightly, but I firmly believe in the rule of law and that justice must be served, she said. The case drew attention from celebrities and activists, including Kim Kardashian West and Martin Luther King III, asking Ivey to intercede. In the case of Nathaniel Woods, the actions of the U.S. Supreme Court and the governor of the state of Alabama are reprehensible and have potentially contributed to an irreversible injustice. King, the son of Martin Luther King Jr., said in a statement after the execution, "It makes a mockery of justice and constitutional guarantees to a fair trial." During Woods' 2005 trial, prosecutors said he and his roommate Spencer were involved in the sale of crack cocaine from their Birmingham home. My thing is this, why is it necessary to bring up narcotic charges from the subsequent year? Like, what relevancy does that have to do with the case? Don't you guys hate when media publications try and say things like, oh, well, he did weed in second grade. Oh, he had a Long Island iced tea after a long day of work, so he definitely was about to go cause harm to somebody that night. And it's like, seriously? But anyways, nothing new. We know how the larger society are masters of portraying us in the worst light. They do it in movies and pretty much every avenue of life. So let me go ahead and get back to the article. While prosecutors didn't dispute that Spencer shot at the officers, Woods was tagged as an accomplice, which in Alabama means that even if a person didn't pull the trigger, they are still eligible for the execution penalty. In addition, Alabama remains the only state in the nation in which a jury doesn't have to be unanimous to impose the execution penalty and can still enact it with at least 10 jurors in favor. While Spencer is on execution roll after he was convicted of murder, no execution date has been set. Supporters of Woods have said he was the victim of incompetent counsel who failed to conduct an adequate investigation and missed key deadlines for appeals. Woods could have benefited from a plea deal of 20 to 25 years in prison, but supporters said he was wrongly informed by his own attorneys that he wouldn't be convicted of capital murder because the state needed to prove he pulled the trigger. Mr. Woods did not accept this plea deal because he thought with counsel's encouragement that he would be acquitted of these charges because the evidence would prove that he was not the shooter that day, according to a petition objecting to his imprisonment. In addition, supporters said no evidence was produced that showed Woods plotted with Spencer and that it was Spencer who acted impulsively on his own when he opened fire. Woods' execution was the first in Alabama this year and the 67th in the state since capital punishment was reinstated in 1976. Under Alabama law, someone who helps to take a person's life from a police officer is just as guilty as a person who directly commits the crime, Ivey said. Since 1983, Alabama has executed 2 individuals for being an accomplice to capital murder. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall said in a statement Wednesday that the concerted effort by supporters was a last-minute movement to save cop Nathaniel Woods from his just punishment. So again, you see how racist the state of Alabama is, and I really beg to say that it's not just Alabama, but this entire country. Think about other aspects of the criminal justice system, how many black people accept plea deals, how many black people cannot afford a lawyer, how many black people don't receive a jury of peers who look like them and can identify with the struggles that they deal with culturally and racially. And I really can't even fathom how duplicitous and deceptive a decent attorney is because it speaks to one's credibility. For example, you might be able to afford a decent attorney, but how do you know you can really trust a defense attorney that's going to have your best interest, let alone one that you can actually trust? And these are the questions that I think that we should really ask ourselves and think about, because as it pertains to helping us understand whenever we end up in these predicaments, how it actually is more of a detriment to us than it is a benefit. So I feel bad for Nathaniel, and I probably would have done the same thing. And if I were in his situation, I wouldn't have accepted the plea deal, because why confess to something you know that you didn't do? And there are rare cases where you can be acquitted of charges where the case is dropped altogether. So I admire Nathaniel for his courage for not giving in to pressures that so many of us are vulnerable to in cases of tension and fear. And I actually remember that I signed the petition myself to support the efforts of his plight. Now, this is my own personal opinion, but I don't think execution should be allowed, because I believe it's inhumane. And I also believe that people should serve life terms. They should have to wake up every day and feel that mental and physical subjugation, that anguish, and other consequences a person feels when they're locked up, because in my opinion, this lets them feel the effects of what they did, and it's supposed to help them understand, like, look, you did this and now you had to pay the price for it. So that's why I say execution to me seems unfair, because it seems like they escape that imprisonment by having their life taken, so they can't suffer at all other than just having their life forcibly taken away and them having to leave this realm by force. And I feel extremely sorry for Nathaniel again, because it's like he fought till the end, thinking that he would be able to beat this, and it cost him his life. And of course, you guys know that this is a solution-based channel, so what I want to do is I want to give you some options on how to avoid these types of situations. And I know that there is a such thing as being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you might be the one who just happened to be standing there, but what I want to speak to is in terms of cases that are unavoidable. So this will be the solution. Okay, so first of all, if you can, please do not ingratiate yourself in drug-related activity. I know sometimes, we try to do it and feed our families or support ourselves, but it is not worth it. When you become entangled in the criminal justice system, especially when it's one of us, it's pretty much a wrap. And I know some of us are able to turn our lives around for the better, and that's great. But for those who are not that lucky, we have to depend on other means to make ends meet. Now, I'm not saying that, all Black people turn to this lifestyle. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. So I don't want anybody to come on here and try to twist my words. But what I am saying is I'm trying to say, if you can do things like work for your family, if your family has like a small business, that he or she runs, or if you have a good relationship with that family member or even a friend, I would highly recommend this. That way they can help you to get back on your feet. So, maybe you can kind of generate some income for your survival. Now, in the case where you are a person who has a loved one in the criminal justice system, first off, try and research affordable attorneys. Then next, read some of the reviews of the attorneys. I know it may sound weird, but try to look at every single review. And I say this because positive reviews sometimes aren't genuine, and sometimes negative reviews aren't always honest either. But what I'm trying to say is, if you see a pattern where it seems like that you're seeing more reviews that are negative, then obviously, don't go with that attorney. We do have to do our own research on who we conduct business with, especially when it comes to attorneys. So if you absolutely cannot afford an attorney, I understand. But I would even suggest trying to maybe do something like create a GoFundMe and explain the situation on there to garner attention and get the money for an attorney that way. But I say these steps to exhaust all efforts, because you should really research before just placing all your trust in a public defender. They don't have the proper resources to help, and sometimes they themselves may be worse than an attorney. And you see how, like what it said in the article, how it gained the attention of some celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Martin Luther King III. So that's why I say make sure you guys try to think of different options as far as getting attention and getting the eye of the public, so that way they can be brought to fruition on this. So also, please research who you vote for. I cannot place enough emphasis on this. Ivey should have never been able to Ivey never should have been allowed to reach this point in her career. I said it before and I'm going to say it again. Please research up and down who it is you're voting for, because hopefully it will help to prevent cases like this. If we properly vetted these politicians, then we probably would have more of a chance at them granting clemency to provide to people who rightfully deserve it, like Nathaniel did. And there's no way two people said that he didn't do it and still got the worst possible outcome. Like, that really makes no sense to me. But if we thoroughly research these political candidates, there is a less likely chance of this corruption in some of the most elite positions. Now, you all should know how I feel about voting. I feel like oppression exists everywhere, so your oppressors will ultimately adhere to the agenda given to them by the dominant society, regardless of who you vote for. But that's just my opinion. And I still heavily encourage you guys to vote, but to do it with the knowledge of who you're going to vote for. And that's all I'm saying. So definitely rest in peace to Nathaniel. My condolences go out to his family, and I really hope that they eventually find some kind of healing. I can't imagine having a loved one forcibly taken away from you. And, he or she didn't do it, but the system is something that is worse than savage. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here, but do me a favor, you guys, make sure that you tell your loved ones close to you that you love them, hug and hold them close to you, because we're most certainly at war within our own country, and it's a war that is against us, obviously, and it's not a joke. I mean, the length that this oppressive establishment will go to end us, it's definitely not a joking matter. So with that being said, make sure you guys weigh in the comment section below. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, and I'll see you in the next one.